On a cold December morning in 1927, a man in a Santa Claus suit walked into a Texas bank and pulled a gun. Minutes later, two were dead, children were screaming, and the outlaw behind it all vanished into the chaos. His name? Marshall Ratliff. Marshall Ratliff was born in the late 19th century in a small, dusty Texas town. His family was poor, his father hammered steel as a blacksmith, and his mother washed clothes for extra cents. "This anvil won't shape itself," his father used to mutter, the clang of metal ringing through their tiny house. Even as a boy, Marshall had a way with words. He was sharp, slippery, and always talking his way out of trouble. "You've got quite the silver tongue, Marshall," a neighbor once said, catching him sneaking apples from her yard. But behind the charm was frustration. "Why do we always have to struggle, Mama?" he once asked. "Life's just that way, son," she said, too tired to explain. By his teens, Marshall had stopped asking. He skipped school, ran with gamblers, and learned how to lie, cheat, and take. "That Ratliff kid," the sheriff once said, spotting him by the general store, "he's trouble." At 14, Marshall was caught stealing coins. His father beat him hard, physically and emotionally. "You'll learn respect one way or another," he said coldly. That night, staring at the sky, Marshall made a promise to himself. "I'll never let anyone take from me again." From there, the path was set. Petty theft turned to hustling, and hustling became a way of life. "You've got potential, kid. Don't waste it," a gambler once told him. But Marshall was already looking beyond the card tables. He didn't want to get by. He wanted to take everything. Marshall Ratliff's teenage years marked a turning point in his life. The small town seemed to shrink around him, its boundaries suffocating his growing ambitions. "I ain't gonna rot here like the rest of them," he told his friends one summer evening as they sat by the creek tossing pebbles into the water. By 16, Marshall's circle had solidified around a group of misfits. They spent their days gambling behind barns and their nights dreaming of escape. "Marshall's got a head for schemes," one of his friends remarked, admiration mixing with a hint of jealousy. "He'll get us out of here." But not everyone in town shared that admiration. The sheriff's visits to the Ratliff home became more frequent. "Keep your boy in line, Mr. Ratliff," he warned one afternoon, tipping his hat to Marshall's father, who stood with a hammer in hand and weariness in his eyes. "Folks are getting tired of his tricks." Marshall, standing just out of sight, smirked. "Tired of me? They'll be begging for my help one day," he muttered under his breath. Despite his bravado, there were moments of reflection. On some evenings, Marshall's mother would find him staring out at the horizon, a rare softness in his gaze. "What's on your mind, Marshall?" she asked once, touching his shoulder. "Freedom, Ma," he replied quietly. "Not just from this town, but from everything." His mother sighed, her expression a mix of love and worry. "Freedom's earned, not taken, son." Her words lingered, but they did little to change Marshall's trajectory. By the time he was 18, he'd moved on from petty theft to more calculated crimes. "You've got talent, kid," an older hustler told him during a poker game in a neighboring town. "With your brains and guts, you could run this place." Marshall's response was a sharp grin. "I'm thinking bigger than this place." It wasn't long before his ambitions began to manifest in bolder schemes. The local gossip painted him as both a troublemaker and a prodigy, a boy too clever and too reckless for his own good. "That Ratliff boy's either going to end up rich or in a cell," one shopkeeper mused as he swept his storefront. "Mark my words." Marshall, overhearing, simply chuckled to himself. Why not both, he thought, already planning his next move. As Marshall Ratliff entered his 20s, his ambitions outgrew the confines of small-town Texas. His reputation as a cunning operator had spread, and he began to associate with more seasoned criminals. "You've got a knack for planning, kid," a notorious outlaw named Buck remarked during one of their first encounters. "Stick with me, and we'll make some real money." Marshall's early jobs were small but carefully executed. A general store here, a stagecoach there. "Don't get greedy," Buck advised, lighting a cigar as they counted their take from a recent robbery. "The moment you start grabbing more than you can carry, the law will be on you like flies on a carcass." Marshall nodded but stored the lesson away with skepticism. Maybe Buck's too careful, he thought. Big risks mean big rewards. The turning point came when Marshall's crew set their sights on a train shipment rumored to be carrying a hefty payroll. "This'll put us on the map," one of his partners said, excitement gleaming in his eyes. But Marshall, studying the plan, felt unease. "It's too loud," he said, shaking his head. "We need to stay in the shadows. Hit them where they least expect." Despite his reservations, the crew went ahead with the train heist. As Marshall had predicted, it ended in disaster. The authorities were tipped off, leading to a violent confrontation that left 2 members of the gang dead and the rest scattered. "You're lucky you weren't there," Buck told him later, his voice tinged with bitterness. "But you can't keep ducking forever. Sooner or later, you'll have to take the heat." Marshall's response was curt. "I'll take the heat when it's worth it." This philosophy guided him as he began to plan more audacious crimes. "Banks," he said one night, his voice calm but cutting, as he leaned over a warped table in the back of a smoky saloon. "That's where the real money is. Not some poker pot or stagecoach with 2 pistols and a prayer. Banks." Helms flicked ash off his cigarette. "You're not the first outlaw to think that. Most of them end up full of holes or strung up before sundown." "That's because they think like outlaws," Marshall said. "I think like a showman. You rob a bank when no one's watching, when the whole damn town is drunk on eggnog." Hill squinted. "You're saying Christmas?" Marshall nodded, spreading out a hand-drawn map of Cisco. "The 23rd Friday, last business day before the holiday. Folks will be inside cashing checks, not guarding vaults. And here's the twist. I go in dressed as Santa Claus." The men looked at each other, blinking. "You've lost your damn mind," Davis muttered. "A Santa suit?" Marshall leaned in, voice low and deliberate. "Picture it. Kids waving, shopkeepers tipping their hats. No one suspects a thing until the bags are full." Helms grunted. "Until the guns come out." "That's where you come in." Marshall pointed at each man. "Helms, getaway driver. You know the side streets and blind curves better than any lawman. Hill, you handle crowd control. No shouting, no panic, just authority. Davis, you stay near the teller. Keep 'em moving fast and silent." He tapped the map again. "The bank has 2 exits, main door here, bookkeeping room here. We go in through the front, and if it gets hot, we slip out the back and cut through the alley toward this garage on 7th. Stolen cars already prepped. New plates, clean tires, half tank. We switch rides at the Orchard Trail and vanish south. No one will be looking that way." Hill raised a brow. "And the cash? Bonds?" "They keep payroll and deposits in Vault Box B. End-of-year loads. I scoped it last week. The manager's predictable. Leaves the front cage open during high traffic." "And the guards?" Helms asked, narrowing his eyes. "There aren't any. Not inside. Just a beat cop who does rounds at noon. We hit at 11:10. In, out in 6 minutes." Davis still looked uncertain. "What if someone triggers an alarm?" Marshall smirked. "Cisco's bank doesn't have a silent alarm. Yet. It's too proud of its small-town trust. That's their weakness. We exploit it." The room went quiet. The only sound was the soft clink of melting ice in a glass. Finally, Hill spoke. "You realize the Bankers Association put out a bounty. $5,000 for every dead bank robber. That's $85,000 in today's money. You walk in with a beard and bells. You might as well paint a target on your back." Marshall's eyes glinted. "That's why we don't give them time to shoot. We don't shout. We don't fire. Unless we have to. It's a magic trick, boys. You smile, you wave, and you disappear with the money." Davis exhaled slowly. "You really think you can pull this off?" Marshall's voice was a whisper now, intense and calm. "I don't think. I know. And if any of you doubt it, walk away now." No one moved. "Good," he said, sitting back. "Then get some rest. Next Friday, we make Texas history." The morning of December 23rd, 1927, dawned cold and bright in Cisco, Texas. Children played in the streets, their laughter mingling with the jingling of Christmas bells. It was the perfect cover, Marshall thought, as he pulled the red Santa suit over his shoulders. "You sure about this, Ratliff?" One of his accomplices, Davis, asked, his voice tense as he adjusted the brim of his hat. "It's not about being sure," Marshall replied coolly, adjusting the fake white beard. "It's about making sure they never see it coming." Outside, Marshall's appearance as Santa Claus drew smiles and waves from the townsfolk. "Merry Christmas," a shopkeeper called, tipping his hat. Marshall raised a hand in greeting, his eyes scanning the street. He saw no signs of suspicion, just the perfect combination of distraction and cheer. "Stick to the plan," he muttered under his breath as the group approached the First National Bank. The bank's interior was bustling with holiday activity. Customers lined up to deposit money, and tellers worked swiftly to handle the end-of-year rush. As Marshall stepped inside, his booming laugh drew attention. "Ho, ho, ho! Merry Christmas, folks!" The room turned toward the jovial figure in red, some smiling, others confused. Behind him, Hill and Davis slipped their pistols from their coats. The room froze as the gleaming barrels came into view. "This is a robbery. Nobody move!" Hill barked, his voice cutting through the stunned silence. "Mama, why is Santa doing this?" Her response was hushed and fearful. "Hush, darling. Just stay quiet." Marshall stepped forward, the fake beard now slightly crooked on his chin. His eyes no longer warm, locked on the little girl. He crouched down slowly, leveling his pistol just inches from her temple. So close the cold steel almost kissed her skin. "Little girl," he whispered, his voice low and smooth like oil. "This could be your last Christmas gift from Santa. Want to guess what's inside the box?" The child whimpered, frozen. Her lower lip trembled. Her mother gasped, reaching out instinctively, but Hill shoved her back with the butt of his gun. "Say thank you, sweetheart," Marshall continued, circling the muzzle near her ear. "It's rude not to thank Santa. You were a good girl this year, right?" She nodded in silence, eyes wide and glassy with tears. "Then keep being quiet. Stay good, or I'll put coal in more than your stocking." He stood abruptly, voice switching back to cold control. "Everyone stays calm, and no one gets hurt." He turned to a teller, tossing a sack onto the counter. "Fill it. Cash and bonds. No funny business." The teller's hands trembled as he obeyed, the sound of bills rustling like dry leaves in the tense air. Outside, the car idled, Helms gripping the wheel, knuckles white. "Move faster," Davis hissed, scanning the entrance. "We're not here to play Santa forever." In the corner, Mrs. Blassingame's heart pounded as she clutched her daughter tightly. Her eyes darted to the bookkeeping office and the alleyway door beyond. Taking a deep breath, she whispered, "Stay quiet and follow me." Moving carefully, she edged toward the back room, her daughter's small hand clasped in hers. As the bandits focused on their demands, Mrs. Blasingame slipped through the bookkeeping office and out the alleyway door. Once outside, she ran as fast as she could, her voice echoing down the street. "They are robbing the bank." The cries reached the nearby police station, where Chief of Police G.E. Bitt Bedford was going over the day's plans with his officers. A veteran peace officer and a towering presence in the town, Bedford immediately recognized the gravity of the situation. "Grab the riot guns," he ordered, his voice calm but firm. Turning to his deputies, R.T., Rio Reedes and George Carmichael, he said, "We're not letting them get away." Inside the First National Bank, tension thickened as Marshal Ratliff and his accomplices began barking orders at the terrified customers. The initial confusion of seeing Santa Claus wielding a gun had given way to cold, paralyzing fear. Ratliff's sharp eyes scanned the room, weighing his options as he motioned to his men to stay vigilant at the doors. "We're not leaving empty-handed," Ratliff muttered, his voice low but commanding. He turned to the bank manager, his pistol steady. "You've got 2 minutes to fill this bag. Cash only. No bonds, no checks. Just the real stuff." The manager's hands shook violently as he obeyed, stuffing bundles of bills into the sack. Sweat poured down his temples, his eyes flickering between the barrel pointed at his face and the growing pile of money. Meanwhile, Henry Helms peered through the frosted window, squinting into the street. His face paled. "Marshal," he hissed, "the place is crawling. I see rifles. Lots of them. We're boxed in." Ratliff's jaw locked. He stepped away from the counter, pacing like a cornered wolf. Outside, the crunch of boots and the low murmurs of armed men grew louder, closer, heavier. "Damn it," he growled. "They're quicker than I thought." Davis, the youngest of the crew, stepped forward, breathing hard. His hands trembled. We need to stop. Just stop." Ratliff froze. "What did you just say?" "We surrender," Davis said, his voice cracking. "We drop the guns, open the doors, and maybe we live through this." Helms spun toward him, eyes wide. "Are you out of your damn mind?" "Look around," Davis snapped, pointing toward the windows. "They've got us surrounded, Marshal. This isn't a plan anymore. It's a funeral." Ratliff stepped close, the pistol still in his hand. "You want to go out there and beg? Huh? Let them parade you through the streets in cuffs? Let them put a bounty bullet in your back while you're on your knees?" Davis's lip quivered. "It's better than dying in here like a dog." Helms shoved him backward. You shut your mouth, Davis. We don't fold. Not now. Shut up, both of you, Ratliff barked. He looked back at the bank manager who had paused mid-stuffing. Keep going. I said 2 minutes. Ratliff turned back to the crew, voice tight and cold. You want to cry, Davis? Do it later. Right now, we hold the line. We get hostages. We make them hesitate. He swept the room with his eyes and locked on the 2 young girls, frozen near their mother. You two, he said, voice flat. Over here. Now. No, please, the mother cried out, wrapping her arms around them. They're just children. Please take me instead. Helms moved forward, shoving her aside. Move, lady. Ratliff crouched in front of the girls, his face inches from theirs. His tone turned quiet, almost gentle but with a steel edge. Listen, little ones. You're going to walk nice and calm. Smile even. You do that, and Santa just might leave something under your tree after all. One of the girls whimpered. The other just nodded, eyes wet. Behind them, Davis was still shaking his head. This is insane, he whispered. We're using kids now? Ratliff didn't look at him. We're staying alive, Davis. That's what we're doing. He straightened, adjusted his coat, and looked at the others. Positions. We walk out slow. One false move, and they open fire. So we make sure they don't blink. The room fell into a taut silence, broken only by the sound of the teller stuffing the last few bills into the sack, and the faraway cocking of rifles outside. The girls hesitated, clutching their mother's skirt. No, the woman whispered, pulling them closer. But Helms strode forward, grabbing the girls by their arms and dragging them toward Ratliff. Their cries filled the room as their mother lunged forward, only to be shoved back by another accomplice. Mama! One of the girls screamed, tears streaming down her face. Quiet! Ratliff barked, his voice echoing through the bank. He bent down to the girl's level, his expression cold. Listen to me. You do exactly what I say, and you'll be fine. Understand? The girls nodded, sobbing. Ratliff straightened, turning his attention to the rest of the hostages. You, he said, pointing at 2 bank employees, Vance Littleton and Frida Strobel. Get up and move to the back room. Now. Littleton hesitated, his face pale. Please, don't hurt anyone, he stammered. Move! Ratliff shouted, waving his pistol. The hostages shuffled toward the back room, flanked by Helms and Robert Hill, another accomplice. Ratliff followed, his eyes scanning every corner for a potential threat. In the cramped back room, the hostages were forced to sit on the floor, their faces drawn with fear. Ratliff leaned against the wall, weighing his options. He could hear the faint murmurs of the crowd outside and the occasional bark of an officer's orders. Time was running out. We're not getting out of here alive without a shield, Helms said, his voice grim. He gestured toward the hostages. We take them. Ratliff nodded, though his jaw clenched at the thought. Fine, he said, but they're leverage, not casualties. We need them breathing if they're going to keep the cops off us. The gang set their plan into motion. Helms grabbed one of the bank employees, shoving him toward the alleyway door. Hill followed, herding the 2 young girls along with another hostage. Ratliff stayed close behind, his pistol raised as they approached the exit. They're out there waiting for us, Hill muttered, peeking through a crack in the door. Ratliff's lips pressed into a thin line as he gestured for silence. We're going out slow, he said. Keep the hostages between us and their guns. Helms hissed. You sure they won't just shoot through us? Not if they think we'll shoot first, Ratliff growled. He looked at the 2 girls and the teller. They're our shield. We move with them. Tight, slow, no sudden moves. Hill adjusted his grip on the girl's arm. We head for the alley and hit Main. Helms, you still got the car lined up at the corner? Yeah, engine's running, Helms said. But we only got 2 blocks of clean street before it's swarming with heat. We need to cut through Cottonwood Avenue. Ratliff nodded. Then into the Orchard Trail. We ditch the car by the creek bridge, grab the stash bag, and switch to the farm truck behind Dawson's barn. We follow the canal road out of town. No one will expect that. Davis wiped sweat from his brow. That old Ford still got gas? Half a tank, Hill said. Enough to get us past the river if we don't stall. Then don't stall, Ratliff snapped, and don't miss a turn. One mistake, and we're all dead. The hostages whimpered as the gang pushed them forward, using their trembling bodies as shields. The door creaked open, revealing a sea of armed citizens and lawmen. Chief Bedford stood at the forefront, his riot gun leveled, his expression grim. Hold your fire, Bedford shouted, his deep voice cutting through the tension. The sight of the hostages brought a momentary pause to the growing crowd. "We're leaving," Ratliff called out, his voice cold and steady. "You shoot, they die. We clear?" "We clear," Bedford answered, jaw clenched. For a brief second, the tension held. Helms whispered, "I think it's working. They're not shooting." "They're waiting," Ratliff said. "They want us to make the first mistake. Then we're sorry on the serum." A single shot cracked the silence. No one knew who fired first. Chaos erupted. The fragile truce shattered as bullets flew in every direction. The hostages screamed and dropped to the ground, their arms covering their heads. Ratliff spun, firing into the crowd. "Get to the car! Move!" Helms fired wildly, blood dripping from his side. This wasn't part of the goddamn plan. "Plans don't bleed," Ratliff shouted, grabbing the sack of cash and dragging a hostage forward. "Cover the left. Get that girl in!" Hill shoved the youngest girl into the back seat. "We're not going to make the bridge if we don't lose them fast." "Then we make them bleed instead," Ratliff barked, slamming the door. By the time the gang piled into the car, the alley was a war zone. Chief Bedford and Deputy Carmichael lay motionless, their blood staining the street. Screams and gunfire echoed behind them. "Go!" Ratliff roared. The engine roared to life, tires skidding on snow as the car tore down Avenue D. Behind them, sirens wailed, bullets cracked, and the whole town of Cisco burned with fury. The getaway car sped down Avenue D, skidding dangerously on the icy road as the gang tried to put distance between themselves and the chaos they had left behind. Inside the car, the tension was palpable. Marshal Ratliff gripped the steering wheel, his injured arm throbbing with pain. Beside him, Henry Helms sat clutching his side, blood seeping through his fingers. Robert Hill was in the back seat, his pistol still drawn, with the two young hostages huddled beside him, their faces pale with terror. "Keep those kids quiet," Ratliff barked, his eyes darting between the icy road and the rearview mirror. The sirens were louder now, pressing into his skull like a warning bell. In the back seat, one of the young girls whimpered, her arms wrapped tightly around her sister. "Shh, please don't cry," Hill mumbled, glancing back. "You're okay. You're okay." "No, they're not," Ratliff snapped. He leaned over his seat, gun in hand. "You want Santa to bring you a coffin this year? Then zip it." "Jesus, Marshal," Helms muttered. "They're just kids. So were we once. Look how we turned out," Ratliff hissed. Eyes on the road. "They're gaining." Behind them, headlights bobbed and twisted along the snowy street, getting closer. "They're gaining on us," Helms yelled, checking the mirror. Ratliff didn't respond. Instead, he jerked the wheel hard to the right. The tires shrieked against the ice. "Roofing nails," Helms barked. "Hill, now!" Hill fumbled for the canvas bag at his feet. "I can't get the damn drawstring." "Rip it open," Ratliff shouted. Hill yanked the bag apart and rolled down the window. Cold air sliced in. He hurled handfuls of sharp roofing nails onto the road behind them. "Please," one of the girls sobbed. Helms watched through the mirror as one of the lead pursuit vehicles fishtailed, skidding into a snowdrift. Another jerked to the side with a blown tire. "It's working," Hill gasped, eyes wide. "Not enough," Helms growled, glancing down at the fuel gauge. The needle dipped below, empty. "We're losing fuel. We must have taken a hit in the tank." Ratliff slammed a fist against the steering wheel. "Of course we did." As the car sputtered and choked, Ratliff's eyes caught movement on the right. A dark green Oldsmobile easing down the opposite lane. "There," he said sharply. "We're switching cars." Behind the wheel sat a 14-year-old boy, Woodrow Wilson Harris. His parents were in the front. Grocery bags filled the back. Ratliff pulled the wheel hard, skidding to a stop sideways. The Oldsmobile screeched to avoid them. He was out the door before the car fully stopped. "Out! Out of the car! Now!" he screamed, gun raised. The Harris family froze. The father raised his hand slowly, shielding his wife and son. "We don't want trouble," he said, voice trembling. "You just found it," Ratliff growled. "Move!" As the family scrambled out, Woodrow stared at the gang, frozen, his fist clenched around something in his coat pocket. Helms and Hill dragged the loot and the two hostages toward the new car. "Hurry the hell up," Ratliff shouted. "Let's go." They all dove in until Hill yelled, "The keys!" He turned the ignition. Nothing. "No keys!" Hill screamed. "It's dead." Ratliff turned his head in disbelief. "What the hell do you mean, dead?" "They're not in the ignition." Woodrow, trembling, stepped back a few inches. "Kids got 'em," Helms growled. Ratliff jumped back out and stormed toward the boy. You got the keys? Woodrow nodded slowly, then pulled them from his pocket. Ratliff snatched them, but in that moment heard the faint click of a rifle bolt in the distance. No time, he shouted. Back to the car. They all stumbled back toward their original, bullet-riddled Ford. Davis slammed the door shut and panted, This is cursed, man. We're cursed. Ratliff threw the bag into his lap. Shut up. Nobody curses Santa. And with that, they tore off again. But the shadows of the law grew longer behind them. With the posse closing in, the gang turned off the main road and into a dense pasture. The terrain became rough, with cactus and mesquite branches scraping against the sides of the car. Eventually, the vehicle became stuck, forcing the gang to abandon it entirely. They released the two young girls, leaving them unharmed but shaken, before fleeing on foot into the wilderness. This way, Ratliff ordered, leading the group into a thicket of scrub oak. His breath came in ragged gasps as he clutched the sack of stolen cash, now heavier than it had ever felt. With the posse closing in, the gang turned off the main road and into a dense pasture. The wheels of their battered cars spun helplessly in the loose soil, cactus and mesquite branches clawing at the sides like nature itself sought to halt their escape. The vehicle lurched forward one last time before coming to a grinding halt, stuck in the unforgiving terrain. Out! Now! Ratliff barked, his voice strained with both desperation and exhaustion. The gang scrambled from the car, dragging the two young hostages with them. The girls, pale and trembling, clung to each other as Ratliff made a split-second decision. You're free to go, he said sharply, motioning for them to leave. The girls hesitated, fear etched into their faces, before one of them whispered, Run! They darted into the nearby brush, stumbling over the uneven ground but driven by the promise of safety. The gang watched them go, momentarily caught between relief and dread. This way! Ratliff shouted, hefting the sack of stolen cash over his shoulder. He led the group into a dense thicket of scrub oak, the branches scratching their faces and hands as they pushed through. Behind them, the distant shouts of the posse grew louder, mingling with the rhythmic barks of bloodhounds hot on their trail. Back on the main road, Sheriff John Hart dismounted from his horse, studying the tracks that veered off into the wilderness. His sharp eyes scanned the surroundings, noting the churned soil and broken vegetation. They didn't get far, he said, his voice calm but resolute. Deputy Cy Bradford crouched beside him, pointing to a patch of dried blood on the ground. One of them's hurt bad, he observed. Might slow 'em down, but it means they're desperate. The rest of the posse gathered nearby, their breath visible in the chilly air. Armed with rifles, shotguns, and pistols, they looked every bit the grim force of justice they intended to be. The promise of a $5,000 bounty had drawn not just lawmen, but ordinary citizens eager to play their part. Spread out, Hart ordered, gesturing toward the thick brush. Watch your step and keep your eyes peeled. These men are armed and dangerous. The group moved as one, their boots crunching against the frozen ground. Overhead, the distant hum of an airplane added to the eerie quiet. One of the men, a young deputy named Williams, muttered, It's like hunting ghosts in this mess. Hart gave him a sharp look. Ghosts don't bleed, Williams. Keep moving. Meanwhile, Ratliff stumbled over a hidden root, cursing as he caught himself. His breath came in shallow, painful gasps, the sack of money feeling heavier with every step. He glanced back at Helms and Hill, both of whom were struggling to keep up. Helms clutched his side, blood soaking through his torn shirt, while Hill muttered curses under his breath, limping with each step. We can't stop, Ratliff hissed, his voice low but urgent. They're right behind us. Helms shot him a look, his face pale and glistening with sweat. And where exactly are we going, Marshal? We can't outrun them forever. Ratliff didn't answer. He didn't need to. The truth hung heavy in the air. There was no plan, just a desperate attempt to stay one step ahead of the inevitable. A few hundred yards away, Bradford knelt beside a clump of scrub oak, his fingers brushing against a discarded rag. The fabric was stiff with blood. They came through here, he called to Hart, holding up the evidence, and they're hurtin'. Hart nodded, signaling for the others to converge on his position. The barking of the bloodhounds grew frenzied, their noses pressed to the ground as they followed the scent trail. One of the civilian volunteers, a wiry rancher named Collins, tightened his grip on his rifle. We've got 'em boxed in, he said, a grim smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. Hart shot him a warning glance. Stay sharp, Collins. Cornered animals are the most dangerous. As the posse advanced, the gap between hunter and hunted narrowed. The brush thinned, revealing the gang's trail more clearly. Every snapped branch and disturbed patch of earth brought them closer to their quarry. Ratliff paused to catch his breath, leaning against a tree as he wiped the sweat from his brow. The sack of money hung limply in his hand, a cruel reminder of the heist that had set this nightmare in motion. "We need to find cover," Hill muttered, his voice hoarse. "Somewhere we can hold them off." Ratliff nodded, scanning the terrain. In the distance, he spotted the faint outline of a shallow ravine. "There," he said, pointing. "It's not much, but it's better than nothing." The three men pressed on, the sound of their pursuers growing louder with every passing minute. Each step felt heavier than the last, the weight of their injuries and exhaustion threatening to drag them down. But Ratliff refused to stop. He couldn't. Behind him lay certain death. Ahead was the slimmest chance of survival. And so they pushed forward, their shadows stretching long in the fading light. The gang stumbled into the shallow ravine, its rocky walls offering a semblance of protection. Ratliff dropped the sack of money onto the ground, his chest heaving as he leaned against a boulder. Helms and Hill collapsed nearby, their faces pale and streaked with sweat. "We hold here," Ratliff said between ragged breaths. His voice, though quiet, carried an edge of determination. "We've got no choice." Helms winced as he adjusted his makeshift bandage, blood seeping through the fabric. "You really think we can fight our way out of this?" he asked, his tone heavy with doubt. Ratliff didn't answer immediately. Instead, he scanned the ravine, his sharp eyes noting every possible vantage point. "We don't fight to win," he said finally, his voice cold. "We fight to survive." Hill, clutching his injured leg, gave a bitter laugh. "That's easy for you to say. You're not the one bleeding out." "Shut up and load your gun," Ratliff snapped. "They're coming." Above the ravine, Sheriff Hart crouched behind a cluster of rocks, his binoculars trained on the outlaw's position. He could see Ratliff moving purposefully, gesturing to the others as he barked orders. Despite their injuries, the gang still exuded a dangerous energy, like cornered wolves ready to strike. Ratliff's head jerked up, his eyes narrowing as he scanned the ridge. For a moment, everything was still. Then a shot rang out, the sharp crack of a rifle echoing through the ravine. The bullet struck the rock near Ratliff's head, sending a spray of stone chips into the air. "They're here," he shouted, returning fire. His shot went wide, but it was enough to ignite the powder keg. The ravine erupted into chaos as gunfire filled the air, the crack of rifles mingling with the boom of shotguns. Bradford moved carefully along the ridge, his shotgun held steady as he peered into the chaos below. He spotted Helms, his blood-soaked shirt making him an easy target. Bradford fired, the blast tearing into the rock near Helms' shoulder and sending him sprawling. "One down," Bradford called, reloading with practiced precision. Below, Hart directed the rest of the posse, their movements coordinated and deliberate. "Keep 'em pinned," he barked, his own rifle cracking as he fired toward the outlaw's position. The posse's numbers gave them the advantage, but the gang's desperation made them dangerous. Ratliff's shots were wild but relentless, forcing the lawmen to stay low. Hill, despite his injuries, managed to wing one of the younger deputies, sending him tumbling back with a cry of pain. As the fight dragged on, the outlaw's resolve began to crack. Helms, clutching his injured side, slumped behind a boulder, his breath shallow and uneven. "We're done, Ratliff," he muttered, his voice barely audible. "We can't hold him." Ratliff didn't respond immediately. His jaw tightened as he fired another shot, the recoil jarring his injured arm. He knew Helms was right. Their ammunition was running low, and the posse showed no signs of retreating. Finally, he turned to Hill, who was struggling to reload his pistol with trembling hands. "Get ready to run," Ratliff said, his voice grim. "We'll make a break for it." Hill looked at him like he was insane. "Run where?" "They've got us boxed in." Ratliff didn't answer. Instead, he tightened his grip on the pistol and prepared for one last, desperate charge. From above, Sheriff Hart kept his rifle trained on the outlaw's position. The ravine was quieter now, save for the occasional groan of an injured man. "They're cornered," he said to Bradford, who knelt nearby with his shotgun. "But they're not done yet." Bradford nodded, his sharp eyes fixed on the outlaw's cover. "Ratliff's a stubborn bastard. He's not the type to give up." Hart raised a hand, signaling to the rest of the posse. "Hold steady," he ordered. "They'll make a move soon. Stay sharp." The posse members shifted in their positions, their fingers resting lightly on triggers. The tension was thick, each man ready for the next burst of action. Ratliff braced himself, counting the seconds in his head. "Now!" he shouted, springing to his feet. The gang moved as one, darting from their cover and heading for the brush. Gunfire erupted instantly, the sharp cracks of rifles mingling with the deeper booms of shotguns. Ratliff fired wildly over his shoulder, his focus on the ridge ahead. Helms stumbled, his strength failing him, but Ratliff grabbed his arm, dragging him forward. "Keep moving," he shouted, his voice barely audible over the chaos. Hill lagged behind, his injured leg slowing him down. A bullet grazed his shoulder, spinning him to the ground. He screamed in pain, clutching the wound as he tried to crawl forward. "Go!" he yelled at Ratliff. "Just go!" But Ratliff hesitated, his gaze darting between Hill and the ridge. "Come on, damn it!" he shouted, starting back toward his fallen comrade. Before he could reach him, another shot rang out. Sharp, clean, final. Hill slumped face first into the dirt, his pistol tumbling from his hand. Ratliff froze mid-step, his breath caught. "Damn it! No!" he muttered, fist clenched so tight his knuckles went white. "Not him too." Behind him, Helms groaned, collapsing in the brush. "Marshal!" he gasped, his voice weak, coated in blood. "Leave me! Just go!" "No!" Ratliff growled, dragging him by the arm toward the low ridge. "We're not dying down here like dogs." They crawled into a tangle of cedar and thorns. Bullets cracked overhead, biting into tree bark. Ratliff dropped beside Helms, heart hammering. "This is it," Helms whispered, eyes fluttering. "I can't go any further." "You shut up," Ratliff hissed. "We're gonna crawl out of this. You hear me?" Helms gave a faint smile. "Ain't no crawling from hell, brother." Suddenly, boots, dozens, the rhythm of pursuit closing in. Ratliff peeked through the brush. Through the blur of smoke and pine needles, he saw them. Sheriff Hart's posse, weapons drawn, fanned out like a noose. "Marshal Ratliff!" the sheriff's voice thundered, sharp and cutting. "It's over! Drop your weapon and come out with your hands up." Ratliff didn't move, didn't blink. The weight of his pistol in his hand was unbearable. He looked down. The bag of stolen money lay torn open beside him, bills soaked in mud and blood. He turned to Helms. "If I step out, they'll shoot me anyway." Helms chuckled, blood bubbling from his lips. "Then at least go out your way." Ratliff sat still for a moment. The cold wind tugged at his coat. A tear slid from his eye. Not for guilt, but fury. "You think if I drop this, I get a trial?" he muttered aloud, not sure if he was asking Hart or God. Silence. He slowly raised the pistol, turning it in his hand. Then he looked skyward and whispered, "Guess Santa won't be coming this year." Suddenly, he lunged forward from the brush, gun raised. The response was instant. A flurry of gunfire erupted. Rifles cracked, shotguns boomed, dirt exploded around him like fireworks. His body jolted once, then again, and then it dropped. Ratliff lay still. His fingers curled tightly around the pistol, as if even in death he refused to let go. Sheriff Hart stepped forward slowly, rifle lowered. The posse behind him held their breath. "Careful," Deputy Bradford warned, shotgun trained on the body. "Even dead men can pull tricks." Hart didn't flinch. He crouched, touched Ratliff's neck. No pulse. "He's done," Hart said, his voice like stone. "It's over." But the air didn't relax. No one exhaled, because though the outlaw was dead, the weight of his madness and the blood he spilled lingered like smoke. Deputy Bradford moved cautiously toward Ratliff, his shotgun still aimed. "Careful," he warned. "Even dead men can pull tricks." Back in Cisco, the townsfolk gathered near the courthouse as word of the posse's return spread. The sight of the bloodied prisoners and the tarp-covered wagon silenced the crowd, their anger and grief palpable. Families of the injured and fallen watched with tear-filled eyes as the posse dismounted, their weary faces etched with the toll of the manhunt. Sheriff Hart addressed the crowd, his voice steady but heavy with emotion. "Justice has been served," he began, pausing to meet the eyes of those gathered. "But it came at a great cost. We'll remember the bravery of Chief Bedford and Deputy Carmichael, who gave their lives to protect this town." After the bloodshed in Cisco, justice came swiftly. Marshal Ratliff was sentenced to death, but before he could face the electric chair, he faked insanity, killed a jailer, and was lynched by an angry mob in 1929. His partner Henry Helms was executed months earlier. Robert Hill, the youngest, got life but reformed, receiving a full pardon years later and living quietly until his death in 1996. Lewis Davis, wounded during the escape, died on Christmas Day. The gang stole $12,400 in cash and $150,000 in securities, enough to mark it as the biggest bank heist in Texas at the time. But in the end, they escaped with nothing and left behind a trail of death, fear, and history. If this story gripped you, drop a comment, hit the like button, and don't forget to subscribe for more true crime that digs deep.